the challenge is trauma does imprint itself, does sort of survive and live inside you until and if you can completely process it out, which is not easy, but ideally I think should be the goal of treatment. Hey, how are you? Yeah, we do this weekly. Okay.
I was just going to ask about PTSD. Like, there's some guilt that sometimes comes up, but logically, when I think through the guilt, it doesn't seem rational that I should have to have this guilt. So, is having a deep sense of guilt that's misplaced or that isn't really justified, is that normal within PTSD, or is it just flashbacks, like just reliving? Because I think I heard that once, that guilt could be a symptom too of PTSD. So I was just,
Yes, certainly it could be. Depends on the circumstances, the situation right then, or the circumstances surrounding the trauma. Absolutely. In terms of having PTSD, there's nothing to feel guilty or ashamed about having it.
no,
Nobody
no,
wants it, right? So that absolutely is not the case. But the challenge is trauma does imprint itself, does you know does sort of survive and live inside you until and if you can completely you know process it out, which is not easy, but ideally I think should be the goal of treatment. But yeah, certainly guilt definitely accompanies a lot of traumatic experience and things like
yeah.
PTSD. Sure.
Yeah, it can be very confusing because if you were in a family, let's say there was incest and then the caregiver or guardian betrayed you, and I'm using the word betrayal because they kind of use that. I listened to a audiobook called Beyond Betrayal. It was
Mm,
about male childhood sexual survivors. And let's say you're angry because you were small, young, vulnerable, you had no strength, no power to fight back. So let's say your parent, your caregiver did something to you, abused you sexually. Now you're treating her in a way, and you don't know why you're treating her that way. Like, you don't feel like you're doing it because of what you're doing. But there's something deeper. You have this internal rage. So maybe it happened when you were very young. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm trying to
yeah.
figure myself out because it seems like that's kind of what's going on. Um,
Yep.
I don't know if it's an evolutionary thing that maybe to prevent inbreeding. I don't know. I go really deep, but I
Yeah.
know that in nature people don't do that kind of stuff. So that's why,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
or else the species would weaken, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
would
No. No.
weaken.
No. 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 No.
So
It. Yeah. It's
yeah,
not.
so that's another story. But I think maybe that's why I'm angry, or I it's just not appropriate. Whatever the reason is, I felt rage, like anger towards um some of the people that were in my family that I feel like they betrayed me.
Right.
And but now I have guilt on those actions that I did that I know were justified. I did them because they did something to me first,
Right.
but I still feel guilt because of some of the things I did to them. It's kind of a crazy, but I couldn't control it. I couldn't
No.
control
No.
it.
No. And also remember, especially we're talking about young children, right? They're, as you say, their understanding, their coping abilities, I mean, are very, very limited, and they're put in a very difficult situation. And so it is appropriate to have some anger towards people who abuse you, whoever they are. Yeah. How that's expressed, managed, what have you, is a different issue. But it's certainly nothing to feel guilty about. People with very severe trauma, do their alter egos are separated off because those alter egos have traumas that are just too traumatic memories that are too difficult to share. But then, the rest of us might have what we might call fragmented personalities. We're aware of those feelings and thoughts, but they're just different sides to us and different sides that have different cellular programming, right? And so anyone who's been through something like what you're saying is likely to have that, to be honest. There is going to be confusion, especially where abusers are family members.